We're going to talk about chambers, specifically chamber dimensions and things. The reason for this is the very extreme misunderstanding in some areas to do with chambers. And it's all brought on by the newbies, by the young crowd that think they got all the answers, that don't have any experience, that don't know what they're talking about. And it doesn't help things when they are misguided by individuals that don't know any more than that they know. And here's where I'm headed. I've been very aware of chamber dimensions in relationship to how the chamber Reamer pilot fits a barrel virtually from day one when I started my career as a gun maker. Now, here's where the problem lies. Here's what the subject really is all about. It's all about dimensions. Now, it was magnified considerably. These problems that I'm going to touch on extensively, they came out with the 300 PRC, precision rifle cartridge. First place, it's not any more precision than any other cartridge. These designations, these words are used for a sales aspect. Now here's what we're told. We're told that the free bore section of the Reamer, which is just the area just ahead of the case neck, before it goes into the taper or the lead of the throat, six-tenths of a thousandths larger than bullet diameter. Yeah, it sure as hell is on the Reamer. That's what the Reamer measures. But here's what these people that are talking, these inexperienced people that are talking, whether it's a gun writer, whether it's somebody involved with this, they do with the development, they don't know what they're talking about and they don't know what the perimeters are. Now here's the real situation. Every last Reamer pilot, the pilot has to be smaller diameter than the bore of the barrel. Bore is the top of the land of the rifling, folks. You cannot put a pilot of 300 diameter in a 300 diameter bore hole. It is not possible, folks. That is a light or heavier than light press fit. Now you can't press fit a Reamer pilot into a barrel because you're going to screw up the rifling, folks. This is just plain and simple. The pilot has got to be somewhere in the neighborhood of about 4/10,000ths or maybe a little more smaller than the diameter of the bore. Now here's where things get compounded. Now that Reamer that is made with a free bore section that's 306/10ths of a thousandths in diameter, the Reamer has to be made with a pilot smaller than the bore. So here's where we pick up some tolerances, folks. And when you start your operation, automatically the Reamer is going to cut larger because of the clearance that's necessary for the pilot of the Reamer. Now it's going to cut closer with a Reamer with a solid pilot, the same diameter solid pilot as it would be with the same diameter revolving pilot. Reason being that this reamer is going to cut closer is because there's no clearance for a pilot on the reamer, because there's a removable pilot on a reamer. This applies the same to pilot on the reamer that's a removable pilot as it applies to the clearance to do with the pilot in the bore. Now that also has to have clearance. That pilot has got to slip on the section of the reamer that accepts the removable pilot. Now we're compounding tolerances here. Compounded one tolerance by assuming, and I guarantee you there isn't one of you people out there that know how to check the dimension of the throat with bore gauges. I have bore gauges to do all these things. I have been doing it for over 50 years, checking these dimensions. I know what they are. I've checked rifles, for instance, in 300 PRC. The free bore section done with a reamer that's cut to the dimension that I just described, that's not the diameter of the free bore section. Done with a solid with a removable pilot reamer. You've got a removable pilot. That also requires clearance for it to slip on that section of the reamer. All of a sudden now we picked up somewhere between 1 and 1.5 thousandths of diameter. Now that free bore section all of a sudden does not benefit you whatsoever, because it simply has to. By simple logic and dimensional characteristics, it has to cut bigger than what the reamer size says. Now, these things have not been taken into account. And this is where the whole plot thickens. We're right back exactly to where we've been for years and years and years and years since people have been making and manufacturing reamers. We have got a situation here where the knowledge is not out there. You're not going to get it from one of the gun scribes. You're not going to get it from one of these people that have come along and been involved in this project, because nobody has a bore gauge or bore gauges to check a bore. And so here's why I've questioned right from the very beginning the situation to do with the benefit of this 300 PRC. If we have that sort of situation going on, which we do have it going on, and it exists with every rifle chamber that's ever been cut by anybody, regardless of who did it, whether it was done at a factory or done precisionally in a shop such as mine or any place else. It's going to cut to what the tool allows it to cut to, in accordance to what is required for clearance for a pilot to go in a barrel, because there's got to be clearance. We've got double amount of clearance to do with a revolving pilot reamer compared to a pilot that's just a solid pilot. So the solid pilot reamer, provided it's the same size as the pilot on the removable pilot reamer, is going to cut closer, and it's going to cut tighter section there, smaller diameter than the other reamer. This is just all logic, folks. It all comes down to what is possible. And we can build a rifle, at least I can, in any caliber, and control a lot of factors. And the only way that we can come up with this is that we've got to have a reamer made specifically that's smaller diameter than what they tell us that the reamer is made to, which is 300 and 300, 0.306 thousandths of an inch. 3006. That's 306 tenths. Okay? Made that clear. Doesn't make a difference what the caliber is. So there's really no advantage here. Now, I'm going to touch on another area to do with this aspect. A number of years ago, I put out a video on how to size cases properly to fit your chamber. Now, one of the aspects here is to do with accuracy. If a case is sized properly, as I described in that video, fit the chamber, the case does not drop to one side of the chamber because the shoulder hasn't been pushed back too far. The shoulder has simply been touched and adjusted to the point that the case fits properly in the chamber. Now, it should be very, very obvious that that allows the cases that have been fired in that chamber and sized properly, that it's going to center that case up at the shoulder of the chamber. So irregardless of these dimensions to do with the throat, free bore of the throat diameter, the case, if the case is centered in the chamber, these other things, this is actually a bigger benefit than what's been described by these people that don't know what they're talking about. And as soon as somebody comes out here that's come up with this bright idea and brings it out, then somebody has to read that, and then they got to mimic it. And everybody after that just keeps mimicking that person or some other person or another person, but they really don't know what they're talking about. I know what I'm talking about. I know what precision is. This is part of the reason why the rifles that I build and that I work up loads for here at my range, that I build such accurate rifles, because I attend to a lot of these details. And there are other factors to do with precision. A lot of other factors to do with precision. But this 300 PRC is no better, no worse than any other 300 Magnum that we have. It's actually not as capable in the velocity department as numerous other 300 Magnums loaded to equal pressures. Because the case does not, and I repeat, it does not have the capacity to give you the type of performance that a guy should really be looking for. The case holds basically about 8 grains less volume than a 300 Weatherby case. So if we build a 300 Weatherby and attend to these precision details, we can build a better rifle in a 300 Weatherby chambering from a velocity and an energy standpoint downrange than any 300 PRC has ever been capable of. And there are other cartridges also with the same case volume as the 300 Weatherby, or perhaps more, that can provide you with even more performance. It should be very obvious to anybody listening to what I have to say that if we've got a bullet traveling at 2,800 feet a second of a certain weight, and we go to a different case and we increase that velocity to say 3,000, 3,100, 3,200 feet a second, which one do you suppose, considering that we're shooting the very same bullet downrange, which one do you suppose has more energy? The higher velocity bullet from the higher velocity capable cartridge is going to give you that performance. So we've seemed to backed off in a lot of areas here. Real game cartridges don't start until you get somewhere around above 3,000 feet a second, irregardless of the bullet weight. These cartridges that they've come out with lately that are only loaded in the 2,800 feet a second, irregardless of the caliber, only loaded about 2,800 and some odd feet a second, somewhere between there and about 2875. How in the hell do you suppose that they've got the same performance as a cartridge, shooting exactly the same bullet at 3,200 feet a second? The cartridge that shows pushing the bullet at 3,200 feet a second is going to have the advantage, not the little wimpy cartridge that people have claimed to be wonderful 600 and 700, 8-yard cartridges. Fact is, the cartridge is hardly a 400-yard cartridge, irregardless of what you want to shoot with it. According to energy. Here's the other thing. As time has stretched, you see, you just keep dropping the energy value, the energy number. Where now, where we used to have a suggested energy value of say 2,000 foot-pounds at the striking distance when that bullet hits game, now we're down there around 1,400 feet a second. Now, you really think that that cartridge is going to give you the type of performance at the lower velocities, the lower energy levels, that the higher velocity, higher energy level cartridge gives you because it's capable of it? Let's get real. Somebody asked me to compare this cartridge to that cartridge, a 6.5 cartridge to a 7mm cartridge. See? For instance, the 6.5 PRC. Here we are again. Precision rifle cartridge. You know, whoop-dee-doo. Want me to compare this to a 7mm Remington Magnum? There is no comparison. Load both of them to their full potential, and it should be very obvious with the bullet weights that are correct for the cartridge that the 7mm is going to have the edge. It just simply has the edge. It's got a bigger capacity case, a heavier bullet, traveling at higher velocity than the little cartridge with the lighter weight bullets. You know, I guess that as long as there's somebody out here that tells you this and tells you that and tells you something else, you'd swallow it no matter what. This is what's happened. You know, this is where we're losing things so much. This is why I started my video series, because my knowledge base goes way beyond this, way beyond these situations that have came out. There's been no real advantage in the last number of years here with any of these cartridges. With any of these cartridges, we're just simply trying to reinvent the wheel. All you got to do is put a little bit of trickery language out there, put a trickery type of a name on it, and all of a sudden, you know, it's the greatest thing that's ever happened. Well, there are a few people that can see the light, but I certainly hope there are a few more people that see the light from listening to what I have to say to do with this situation, because this is the gospel truth about what we have going on here. This has been what's going on since these things have been basically brought out, you know. So I'm not going to touch on this anymore. It should be very clear. And by the way, when you listen to my video, you need to listen to it. Don't cherry pick it and one thing and another and just pick something that you want out of it. Listen to what I have to say, because I have it tied into various other aspects. Pay attention. This will save a lot of questions in an email by detailing what I've had to say, because I'm constantly answering these things on an email from people that just simply don't listen. Listen to what I have to say and get the benefit, because there's a lot of valuable information out there that you're never going to get anywhere else. Thanks.